Let's get more on that deal to release Israeli hostages and Palestinian detainees. Michael Oren is the former ambassador of Israel to the United States, and he joins me now from New York. Very good to have you with us here on BBC News, Mr. Oren. Let me begin by asking you for your impressions of what we know about this deal so far.
Good to be with you, Jeannie. What we know is what you've heard, the exchange of 50 hostages in the hands of Hamas, women and children, for a 5-day ceasefire, increased humanitarian aid. There's a pause in drone surveillance 6 hours a day. I think that's probably very difficult for most Israelis to understand that, purportedly to allow Hamas to move hostages undetected and release them. That's the deal. The mood in Israel, I must say, is mixed. On one hand, joy of the families being reunited, this exquisite joy. On the other hand, trepidation whether Hamas will use these periods to rearm, regroup, and pose far greater threats to our troops there. There's a fear that this will greatly increase the pressure, both internally and externally, on the Israeli government to extend the ceasefire. And a ceasefire, from Israel's perspective, means that Hamas wins. It gets away with mass murder, and Israel can't restore its internal security. We have about 250,000 people displaced. They can't go back to their homes if there's a ceasefire. So it's a very trying and difficult decision for any Israeli government. I must say, I'm an historian by training, and I can't remember in history any government facing the type of decisions that Israel has to make today.
You say it's a difficult decision for the Israeli government. What do you think happens next? Do you think this deal will hold in the first place?
Well, based on history, sort of empirically, no. Hamas doesn't negotiate in good faith. Hamas is a terrorist organization. They could conceivably get 40 hostages back to Israel and say, listen, we want another day of ceasefire. Or they can dribble it. After the 5 days, they'll say, we'll give you another 3 hostages in terms of another 2 days. And then you get this kind of bargaining going on, which is very dangerous for Israel strategically. And nobody knows where this is going to end. But again, the pressure is going to mount already from the international community, even from the United States. And the Biden administration, that's been very, very supportive, is going to have to get probably some concessions from Israel in terms of increased humanitarian aid, even perhaps some type of statement in support of a two-state solution in order for the Biden administration to continue to support Israel's campaign to destroy Hamas. And keep in mind, Israel has 2 goals here: getting the hostages back and destroying Hamas. And they aren't always, consonant.
You mentioned the Biden administration. You, of course, are speaking to us from the United States. How pivotal do you think the US government has been behind the scenes in terms of getting this deal across the line? Of course, we know very publicly that Qatar has played a very big role. Yeah,
Qatar gets to win on both ends. It gets to support Hamas and then gets credit for getting the hostages released. You almost have to tip your hat to these guys. They know how to play triple-tiered chess. The Biden administration has been very instrumental, and I think that the Biden administration also has an interest. If you look at what's happening here politically, and I'm talking to you from New York, President Biden's support in the polls, particularly among young Democrats, has just really imploded in recent days because of his support for Israel in this campaign. And he needs to show that he is doing something to ameliorate the situation, to ease the humanitarian situation in Gaza. At the same time, support Israel, because Israel supporters also expect Biden to step up. So he's not in the easiest position either. I'm in the position, I'm not a representative of the Israeli government anymore. I want to be careful about that I think Israel should do its utmost to try to meet the president's requirements in this way. Though I understand it's not easy for Israel, those remaining families of the hostages, and now we're talking about 180 people here, at least 180 families, expect Israel to ramp up the pressure on Hamas in terms of the humanitarian aid, because they believe that is the last bit of leverage that Israel has. So at least let the Red Cross visit the remaining hostages in the hands of Hamas.
Let me ask you about aid, since you mentioned it. We now will see more aid coming across as part of this arrangement, including fuel as well, which has been something that people on the Strip have been in desperate need of for a number of weeks now. Why do you think it was held back for so long when now it is being allowed in?
Well, certainly the fuel is a major issue because Hamas is going to use the fuel. And, I'll put my cards on the table. There was a period when I was in government. I was actually in charge of the Gaza situation for several years. And I know that any aid brought into the Gaza Strip, Hamas takes a major share of. So on one hand, if you want to relieve the humanitarian suffering of the Palestinians, you want to do that in a way that's not going to cost Israeli lives. It really comes down to that. And so it's a delicate, it's a difficult and complex decision, particularly since that Israeli public doesn't want to see that fuel and aid going in because that's the last leverage you have over Hamas to at least let the Red Cross in to see the hostages.
Just before we let you go, I just wanted to get your thoughts on what you see the future in terms of governance of Gaza, of course, whenever this conflict ends.
Well, I think that the major goals of Israel, and I think not just of Israel, the international community should be the demilitarization of Gaza. It should be the internationalization of Gaza, because it's basically an international problem now. It's not just an Israeli or an Egyptian problem. I would hope that some type of international force, and perhaps with a large Arab contingent in it, could be placed there, and that force would oversee the reconstruction of Gaza. Certainly the changing the educational system, where children are learning to kill from infancy, has to be changed. And then we have to explore the possibility of a peaceful, responsible, and stable Palestinian leadership. Whether that would involve the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank would be a big problem, because the Palestinian Authority right now is corrupt and tremendously unpopular. And if there were an election held in the West Bank today, Hamas would win. So you would have to have a very much revamped and reformed Palestinian Authority. But at the end of the day, the control, the governance of Gaza has to be in the hands of the Palestinians, assuring that Israel will be able to maintain its security along that border by various means.
OK. Michael Oren, the former Israeli ambassador to the United States, joining us from the US. Thank you very much for sharing your insights on our main story.